Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmus und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Vayikra. Today is Beis, Nissan, the Yom Milula, Stalkus of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and we're going to speak about him later. And Emir Tashem Chassidim. As soon as we come to the month of Nissan, we're thinking about Yud Aleph Nissan, the Rebbe's birthday, which is in a week from Sunday. So these are all things that are on our minds right now. First, we'll start with Tzedakah. Gedel Tzedakah Shemakarev Segula, Mashiach should come now. Next, we're going to say a posik from the Rebbe's new kapitel. Emir Hashem, next Sunday, not this Sunday. Next Sunday we start Kapitel Kuf Chav Hey. That's the Rebbe's new Kapitel. And in Kapitel Kuf Chav Hey, so one of the psukim it says over there is Heitivu Adoinoi Latoivim Hashem Heitivu Adoinoi Latoivim V'lisharim B'libaisam. Hashem should be benevolent to the benevolent and to those who are upright in their hearts. So the subject we're going to talk about is this pasuk connected to the parsha. You could say, "Heitivu Hashem l'tovim," be good to the ones who are good. And what does it really mean to be good? Good doesn't only mean on the outside that you do the right thing, but v'lisharim b'libaisam, the ones that are upright in the hearts. Like when we speak about Avos Yisrael, and we have that Yom twice, where it says "Hamagishmak" in Tonatei Vayidin, to enjoying to do a favor another, not only doing the favor, but doing it with a smile, doing it in the way they convey your pleasure in doing it, etc. So in this week's Parsha, we're going to focus three places that give us the same message. I like to look always for the messages and connect it also to, obviously, today is Beis Nissan, the Yom Lula of the Rebbe Rashab. So first, let me talk about the subject in general, and then we'll get into the details and show you three places where in this week's Parsha, we get that message. In general, Chassidus Chabad has two general streams. We spoke about this many times. There's many different ways to talk about it. It's an endless discussion. But let's just talk about it a certain way, which is there's two ways how a person can change. There's the outside-inside approach and the inside-outside approach. Outside-inside approach is what it says in the Chinuch, a person is drawn after his actions. If you have a certain routine, a certain structure, habits, so from the outside, from your levushim, from your actions, you can also change your koiches. It can have an effect on your nature. Like it says, Hergel Nasa Teva. Actually, the Alter Rebbe says, Hergel Nasa Teva Sheni. By doing something enough times, it can become your nature. So how that shows how the outside has an impact on the inside. Then there's another approach from the inside to the outside. You have to work on your mind. You have to work on your perspective. You have to work on your outlook. If you change the way you look at things, so then obviously you'll change your actions. But sometimes it starts with the mind. You have to look at things differently. You have to have a different perspective, and then everything changes, like when we call this the concept of reframing. So that would be the inside-outside approach. First, you got to work on your attitude, your approach, and then your actions will change. So this is a subject. The truth is, in all honesty, I myself, I've never seen a mimer or someone write some paper, some article that shows how these two things work perfectly together. But I would just say in simple words, since you could say that the story of Judaism is totality. So if we're talking about a person and his relationship with Hashem, true intimacy means that it has to be from every single which way, from every single angle, and from every single side. Totality. So as we spoke about this in different times, there's the idea of subservience, transcendence, let's say, where you go out of yourself completely. But then there's also inner character transformation, where it's not that you're losing yourself, but you actually have a makeover. So now's not the time to get into it. We spoke many, many times about this in the past couple of years. But let's speak about, if we're talking about different avodas. So let's talk about mitzvahs, for example. Yeah, we have a mitzvah. Usually we say that you don't have to have the kavana parotis of a mitzvah, but the kavana klolos. This is a question. When you're doing a mitzvah and you make the bracha, Asher kiddushonu b'mitzvah v'tzivonu, Hashem commanded us. So in most cases, without the kavana, it's enough because you had the idea that you're now fulfilling Hashem's command. What is the definition of the word mitzvah? Commandment. So if you have that kavana klolis, which is a general intention that covers all the mitzvahs, you are yetzer the mitzvah. But then there's sometimes, as an exception, where we say that the kavana paratis, the particular purpose of this mitzvah, is important. Where do we see that, for example? In Sukkot. It says, when it says that we commanded us in the mitzvah of Sukkot, it says, Ki, but Sukkot say shafti as b'nei Yisrael. So it gives a reason. So according to many commentators, since the pasuk says, L'man yedu, so you should know about it, that means it has to be in your consciousness when you're sitting in a sukkah, what the mitzvah of sukkah is about. Another mitzvah, interestingly, that it says the reason is by Gida Nosha. It says the story what happened, Yaakov who fought with the angel of Esav and he was hit. And then it says, therefore, for all time, we don't eat from the Gida Nosha because of what happened. I'm just bringing out a point that usually we don't focus on the Kavanah Pratis. But now, Sefer Vayikra, we start with Kabbonis, sacrifices. And over here too is a question, when it comes to Kabbonis, is the Kavanah important, less important, or more important than other mitzvahs? So in a certain sense, we're going to bring out that by Kabbonis, in a way, the kavanah is more important. Because by Kabbonis, the whole idea of the carbon is really not the physical acts that we're doing. Bringing a cow, putting it on the altar, going through all these rituals, spraying blood. What's going on over here? What's the whole idea of a carbon? And before we get to that, what I'm going to say now, we're going to focus on three things in the Parsha. The first thing is the Sikha and Chelik Yud Zayin. The second Sikha, but what I'm going to say primarily is from page 12 and 13, where the Rebbe first of all asks a klotz kasha. A klotz kasha is a very general question on the whole subject matter, and that is in the beginning of the Parsha where it says, Odom, a man, ki yakriv, who will bring a sacrifice, and Rashi says of it, Odom ki yakriv, and Rashi says, Kishe Yakriv, when he will bring, which means it's not an obligation. Ki, if. That means he's deciding. And Rashi says, V'kabonis nedova dibrein. Over here, the pasuk is talking about voluntary offerings. And the Rebbe makes a dik, what do you mean, V'kabonis nedova dibrein? Usually we would say, V'kabonis nedova dibra kosev. What do you mean, dibra inyan? And second of all, this in itself is a major question. Why would the Torah start with voluntary sacrifices? You think first you talk about obligations. Imagine a person wants to live in the country, and there's laws. What are the taxes? That's what you got to know. These are your obligations. Then comes voluntary. You want to do more than what's compulsory? No problem. Any situation that you're joining, there's rules and regulations. You want to go to a school, you want to go take a course, you want to go to yeshiva. Whatever you're doing, you're getting a job. In every endeavor in life, we start with the rules. These are the obligations. So if we're talking now about a whole sefer, so much, Vayikra, Tzav, Sazriya, Metzora, Shmini, it's talking about all different kabbanas and all different laws. So you think first we talk about what's the obligations, not the voluntary. So it's a very general question. So the Rebbe in the Sikha in Chelik Yud Zayin, first he gives a technical answer that since the Jews were so permeated with the feeling of love to Hashem, so the Torah wants to address what they could do immediately. No conditions apply, no circumstances apply, not if he didn't have it, not if this, not if that. What could a person do anytime? He can bring a voluntary sacrifice. So therefore the Torah starts with that. But then the Rebbe says another word. A moedik word. You know why the Torah starts with voluntary sacrifices? Because that's reflective of the whole concept, the whole definition, the whole meaning, the whole purpose of sacrifices is more manifest and obvious by voluntary sacrifices. Why? Because if it's an obligation, it could be that you don't really want to do it. You're doing only the action, but your heart's not involved. Who enjoys paying taxes? I have to. So if it's a sacrifice that you have to, one could argue, it's because you don't want to start up with Hashem, so therefore you bring the sacrifice. But a voluntary sacrifice, and since sacrifices is all about the person's totality, you are going through a very intense emotional experience by a sacrifice. A heart involvement. As the Rebbe quotes from the Ramban, who brings that when you bring a korban, the person that brings the korban has to think that the truth is, every time I bring a sacrifice, I'm humbling myself because I could be thinking to myself that this is something that I should be going through. I'm saying, let's say by a korban chatas. In other words, the Ramban is bringing out that the point is not the act that the animal is being offered up as a sacrifice, but it's something that you have to think and have in mind. And the same thing we'll see by another korban, but the Rebbe brings it over here straight away, so I'm going to mention it now. The famous Maimer Zal that said, Echad Amarbe, Echad Amamayit, whether someone who brings a giant, a more expensive sacrifice, or one that's of lesser value, in other words, the main point is the emotional involvement. And by the way, going back to what I said before, the Chassidus brings out the awesomeness of both streams, because on the one hand, the many, many stories where the Alter Rebbe was asked, what's the accomplishment of the Chassidus? Why did the Chassidus come along? And he quoted the word that it says in the Zohar and the Gemara and different things, there's Kavonas HaMitzvahs. B'kitzer, it says that the Ava and Yiras Hashem is like two wings, Gatfen, Leparcha Leila, and without the love and fear, the mitzvahs are like a body without a soul. So Chassidus injected the soul, Nishmasa there I say, it injected the soul into Torah mitzvahs. So too over here, in the whole concept of Korbanos, the word is that by a korban taka, more than other mitzvahs, it's very important to focus on the spiritual dimension, the soul matter. Don't think that it's just about dropping a couple of coins in the charity box, so to speak, and that everything is forgiven. The whole idea is that it's with a full heart, and with a whole heart, with the right intention. And therefore the pasuk, this Vayikra, the whole sefer starts off with voluntary sacrifices, because by a voluntary sacrifice, you know that you're all in. You're all in with your heart and soul because you decided to do it. And some commentators bring out that that's how Rashi learns it out from the word mikem. When is it really coming from you? When it's not because of a commandment, but because it's coming totally from your heart alone, your contribution. And this is how the Rebbe answers Meiredik, B'kabonis nedova dibra inyan. What does it mean, dibra inyan? The whole subject matter, the whole concept of karbonis. B'kabonis nedova dibra inyan, through karbonis nedova, through karbonis nedova, we have a whole definition of the inyan. L'hovin inyan ha-karbonis. What's the whole concept of karbonis? Primarily, that the intention is there, the kavanah is there, the inner experience, emotional experience that you're going through is also involved. Now, when do we see this? Also, the next message is, everyone knows this, where it speaks about the meal offering, which is the poor man's sacrifice. As everyone knows, this is Kapitel Beis, Pasuk Aleph, and the Pasuk says, V'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha LaHashem, when his soul would bring a meal offering to Hashem. And Rashi says, V'nefesh ki sakriv, when his soul would bring le'nemar nefesh b'chol korban is nedava. soul was not used with reference to any voluntary offerings, ela b'mincha, except for the meal offering. And what's the reason? Mi darkel is not a mincha. Who would bring the meal offering? Oni, a poor person. A rich person would bring an ox, something much more expensive, 10 times more expensive, 20 times more expensive. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, although the poor man's offering is modest, malani olav, I consider in his behalf, kilu hikiv nafshoy, as if he offered his soul. So, first of all, 2 lessons straight away is the idea that everybody has an opportunity. It's an equal opportunity path. If somebody wants to come close to Hashem, don't think you have to be rich. And it means at every level, whatever rich means. You could be a poor man, and there's a way for you also to get close through sacrifices. The second shot in the Rashi that we can take straight away is those that learn Chassidus know chapter 15 of the Tanya, which is the idea that for the poor person, guess what? His 15 cents or $5 took more out of himself, of his kishkis, than nefesh. It was the greatest sacrifice. He had to put his soul into it. He was giving away his soul, his bread and butter. For the poor man, the $5 was more expensive than the rich man's $500. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 15, that for some person, certain things come easy, so it's no big deal. It's called a loy avodoi. It's if he's not serving Hashem. But for the person who comes harder, it's much more precious. It's much more valuable. He's called an ovid elikim. And the measure whether someone's an ovid elikim or a loy avodoi is not in the size of his toys. It's not in the size of the korban. It's all measured in the intention. It's all measured in the effort. It's all measured in the thought. How much you're actually sacrificing, how much you're actually giving of yourself. That's the second lesson. The Rebbe in Likutei Sichos adds another word. This is in Chelek Chav Zayin, page 15. And the Rebbe over there adds another word, which is very important. As the Alter Rebbe explains, the whole message of Odom Ki Yaakov means when a person wants to get close to Hashem. So the idea of sacrifices teaches us a path of how we connect to Hashem. And what the Rebbe explains is, the poor man's sacrifice makes that he's more humble also. That's the meaning. The rich man says, hey, look at me, I gave God a Cadillac. I gave him a Rolls Royce. I gave him a prize bull. Whatever the story is. But the poor man, he just brought a bit of flour. So he thinks to himself, this is a meager, this is my meager contribution. So therefore he doesn't have ego. He doesn't say, I am the president of the whole congregation. I am Mr. Important. Look at my contribution. And my name is on the wall. Guess what? That's in a way the greatest impediment, because your ego gets in the way of your connection to Hashem. So I'm going to read to you what the Rebbe says. The words over here are unbelievable. It doesn't bring a big fat ox. No dollars for nakarm, the poorest of poor sacrifices. Is dom merbad goshev yihikiv nafshi lefonai. So here stressed more how he gave himself. He gave his very soul. He doesn't even feel the idea, look at me, I made such a great contribution. I don't know what, it's beautiful, the Rebbe says this expression. Rabbi Yaakov used to make fun of these. Sheinid. He looks at himself. I'm a very important, dignified member of the community. Not only I brought a sacrifice, but behidur. It was top level. I brought the biggest esrig. I brought the most expensive esrig. I was in shul this Tishrei, and somebody bought an esrig. It was so big, it had to fit only in a shoebox. and I'm not exaggerating, and he came to shul the next day, and the esrog was in the shoebox. This Jew is a very good Jew, and it's talked by him, it's a hidden mitzvah. But what the Rebbe is saying over here, that in such a case, you have to be careful that it shouldn't feed your ego. But a person who it costed him, it was a sacrifice for him to buy an esrog, that's a tenth of that size. But for him it was more expensive, relatively speaking, percentage-wise. So it's a greater accomplishment. He comes to shul, he doesn't have such a big esrog. And therefore it adds to his humility. The fact that he has only such a small esrog. So over here we see again the point. We measure it purely based on what's going on in the heart. And last but not least, some more aspects of this idea of the totality of the person is the mitzvah that we have, where the pasuk says in kapitel Beis, pasuk Yud Gimel, v'chol korban minchoscha b'melach timlach, you shall salt your every meal offering with salt. V'leisash b's melech b's elikecha ma'al minchosecha al kol korbancha takev melech. You may not discontinue the salt of Hashem's covenant from upon your meal offering. On all your offerings shall you offer salt. I'm not going to get into what the first pasuk means of it, melech bris. You look it up yourself. So if you learn Chassidus, it explains that the idea of salt. I'm going to say it very quickly because we're running out of time. Number one, salt takes out the blood. That means part of getting close to the Eibishter is you should try to take out your koch, your lust, your excitement about petty trivialities. Don't care so much about the material. Relax. Settle down. It's only Gashmis. That's number one. That's salting the meat. We take out the blood. Another thing about salt is a pasuk in Iyov which says salt enhances the taste of every single food. That means it takes the food, the flavor of that food itself, but when you add salt, wonders are wonders, miracles are miracles, the taste of that food becomes better. It's a taste enhancer. So it's a surmera, we get rid of the bad blood, it also brings out the flavor of this thing itself better. And last but not least, salt is a preservative. That means if we're making a sacrifice to Hashem, a contribution, it shouldn't be that I'm a Shabbos Jew or I'm a Yom Kippur Jew, etc. But my Judaism is constant. It's solid. It's not wishy-washy. It's not external. It's not superficial. Salt as a preservative means lasting power. It's real. It's coming from your pneumius. It's coming from the inside, etc. So what do we see from all these things? Today is Beis Nissan. Beis Nissan is the Yom Elul of the Rebbe Rashab. And there's a lot to talk about the Rebbe Rashab. But the Rebbe Rashab made Timchei Timimim. And if we talk about all the Rabbeim, for me the Rebbe Rashab represents the one who made the West Point, the one who made what all the shluchim today are made of. He set up the educational system. He wrote the Kunst HaTfilah, Kunst HaAveda, Kunst Eitz Chaim, to create generations of soldiers, Navy SEALs, Marines, who are going to go out into the world and transform the world and make the world a better place. And he wanted every single one of these graduates to be even a flinu, outstanding. And when you think of the Rebbe Rashab, there's only one thing that comes to mind: striving for excellence in spirituality. And go for the top. You could do it. And when you think about the years of Timchei Timimim in the village of Lubavitch, and how the Rebbe Rashab was saying the deepest of the deepest of the deepest Hasidic discourses, to who? To boys, 18, 19, 20. And this became the generation that grew up, that the Frierdiker Rebbe with them withstood the horrors of Stalin and kept Judaism alive. And it continues today throughout all the Lubavitcher yeshivas and the concept of shlichus. So to finish off with the story of the Rebbe Rashab, and you'll see this idea again and again, of top level spirituality is also the way the Rebbe Rashab brought up his child, his only son, the Frierdiker Rebbe. One of the stories the Frierdiker Rebbe says is what happened once, one Erev Pesach. This is in Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Gimel Omid 74. The Frierdiker Rebbe was 9 years old, and there was a whole seder of Erev Pesach, getting up very, very early in the morning and going to the mikveh, and then they'd get up and very early, and they put on their Shabbos clothes, Yontif clothes, and they started baking mitzvahs matzah, and then they would work getting prepared, doing the other preparations for Pesach. One of the preparations was to remove the seals of the wine bottles. See there. Anyways, so the Frierdiker Rebbe was dressed in his new Yontif outfit with brand new boots, and he was very busy with the wine, unsealing the corks and this and that. And he was doing it in the Rebbe Rashab's study, in the Rebbe Rashab's room. And he writes, "V'nisharti, and I was very careful, lachlich, as begodai, I was very careful not to make my clothes dirty. Vayikra, and primarily kalkel, as borak hamenalim hachadoshim. I shouldn't destroy the shine of my brand new boots." Anyways, the Rebbe Rashab walked into the room and hikir b'mahalach machshavoisai. He recognized my thoughts, and he told me, "B'divrei hamaschil avodah me'yinu shebesidur." The Alter Rebbe writes in a maimer, moshel, an analogy, misar of a nobleman, a baron, a duke. Hayeshiv al shulchani ha'orach b'chol minei madanim. He has a meal prepared with all sorts of delicacies for people, but he doesn't want, he has dogs that he likes also very much. So what does he do? He throws the mishirayim under the table. V'tachas ha'shulchan eimed ha'kelev, and under the table he has his dogs. U'mecharsim ha'tzomois, who's chewing the bones, the leftover, the bones of the brisket or the steak or whatever. Imagine that the nobleman is going to get off his chair and from the table, and he's going to go under the table to start chewing bones. That's what the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's it. The Frierdiker Rebbe at 9 years old understood the message that his father was reprimanding him that he cares too much about the boots and his new clothes at 9 years old. And what clothes? Clothes for Yontif. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "Doset if mir gepoilt." This had such an impact as I was geschämt zu gucken al big day chadoshim. I was embarrassed and ashamed to look at my new clothes. In other words, to think about it, to care about it. This is chinuch. So there's 4 or 5 places where the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in his talks, Odos is chinuch, this is chinuch. Now what does it mean when you write Odos is chinuch? That means this encapsulates the whole concept of education. Every time the Frierdiker Rebbe says it, you have to think deeply about what the message of the story is. In this case, I believe the message is a couple of messages. Number one, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the message of the Rebbe Rashab is, you're better than that. You're royalty. You're the nobleman. You're the duke. You're the baron. What are you going after the bare bones? That's for the dogs. Who cares about the boots? Who cares about the clothes? Yom Tov is coming. Pesach is coming. Zman Chereseinu. There's bigger, more important things to worry about. And being careful in the hidurim of the chumras of Pesach is more important than your whole pants and your whole shoes. But the message is, because you are better. You're the nobleman. You're the royalty. So I take that message from this story of Doses Chinuch, which means not by talking down to the person, not by being negative, but by lifting up the person. You're better than that. Es passt nicht. And also to think that the Frierdiker Rebbe at 9 years old, he's getting the message, what's important in life, what's not important in life, about priorities. But this story brings out exactly the idea of the Rebbe Rashab. He's looking at his 9-year-old son, and he's already conveying him the message about life, that you should have your priorities in order. What's important is important. And always spirituality is Gabra Satsura Allah Chaymer. So we take from all this, my friends, Mirz Hashem Yiralf Nissan is coming. Each and every single one of us has to make resolutions, a birthday present. And the resolutions should be in the direction of having the right priorities and our involvement in spiritual matters and korbanos. Go for the more richly rewarding emotional experience, so that our serving Hashem shouldn't be dry, shouldn't be lame, shouldn't be dead, but it should be full of spirit, full of life, full of fire, and all in. As we saw 3 times in the Parsha, Odam, by the way, the word can mean Odam, the totality, Ki Yaakov mikem, it's got to come from you. Your insides have to be involved. Your kishkish should be involved in serving the Eibishter. Your totality should be involved. And we see the word from Nefesh, when you really give of yourself, then Hashem sees it and recognizes it that you're giving of yourself, even if it's a $5, but you put your whole spirit into it, because for you that's the best you can do. That's what counts. And finally, the message of the salt, all the lessons we spoke about salt, and the Eibishter Helfen, that if we make the right preparations, the Eibishter will do his part. And today is Beis Nissan, so let us just say in this chus from the Baal Yom Ha'ilula, the Rebbe Rashab should be Pel Yeshua's Bekerev Haaretz, that all those that need help in any area of their life, in Bonne, Chayim, Mezene, sollen geholfen werden, taken from Yad, Mamish, B'toiv Anirvan Nigel. Good Shabbos, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.